Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist in another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where we get together on Sundays to talk some Black Sabbath. And the topic for this Sunday is we're going to be talking about the Black Sabbath box sets, what we're looking forward to, what we're hoping that they're going to do with the future so far unreleased box sets. We're also going to be discussing, are they going to be releasing more box sets? We're starting to get a little bit nervous here, but we're gonna get into that in a second. So, of course, my co-host here, Darren, is back at the Lair. Darren and I do a Black Sabbath podcast together, Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. There'll be a link to that in the description down below. All right, Darren. So let's start with: do we think they're going to be putting out more box sets? Now, the reason why we bring this up, and I did a little research before we started recording, I'm going to go back for the last 3 box sets. So going backwards, it was Technical Ecstasy. Before that was Sabotage. Before that was Volume 4. Volume 4, they announced on December 2nd of 2020, and it was released on February 12th. Sabotage, they announced on April 14th, and it was released on June 11th. Technical Ecstasy, they announced on August 4th, and it was released on October 1st. So the pattern is announcement 2 months before it comes out. It's basically 2-month increments. 2 months before it comes out, they announce it. When it comes out, 2 months later is the next announcement for the next box set. So they've been moving in 2-month cycles here. So the Technical Ecstasy box came out on October 1st. Now, just to note, it is, as of the recording of this episode, it is March 15th. We don't record them live on Sunday, so who knows what could happen between the Tuesday we're recording this and the Sunday that it comes out. Who knows? This whole video could be completely outdated by then. But as we stand right now, October 1st for the Technical Ecstasy box, October, November, December, January, February, we're about halfway through March. We're 6 months in with no announcement. If they follow any kind of cycle here, they want to give it at least 2 months, press thing beforehand. We're looking at 8 months from the last box set till now. I'm nervous. I'm starting to get nervous that something is going on here. There was a pattern that they had going on, and all of a sudden something happened here. What's going on? What do you think?
Well, it's kind of strange. In your cycle, when you figured the timeline out, where did Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules fall into that? Because we can't forget the 2 remastered double albums. That was somewhere in between, I think, Volume 4 and Sabotage, wasn't it?
Or was it? Question. I'll look as we're talking here.
Because, I mean, you got to include that in there too. I know that kind of throws a wrench in the timeline that you had figured out, but I mean, those are pretty significant. They weren't box sets, but I mean, they did hype those up, and a lot of people bought them, and they were promoted pretty well at the time. So I mean, I think that's kind of fits into the equation here as far as trying to figure out where we are.
Mob Rules came out March 5th of 2021.
Okay.
Which would have been a month before they announced the Sabotage box.
Okay.
And I'm looking up Heaven and Hell right now. So they were sort of released, insofar they were released in between. Let's see here. This Heaven and Hell came out April of 2021. So that would have been, that was pretty much right when the Sabotage box came out. So they released those pretty much on top of each other.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of unpredictable. I don't really think, I mean, there's a steady pattern to the Super Deluxe box.
Super Deluxe box, right. Those Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell were just remastered album with an extra disc.
But nevertheless, it was these were releases from a band that, for all intents and purposes, is basically posthumous, so we're going with this release schedule of things that support a band that's no longer active. The Super Deluxe box sets are kind of space. We've had Paranoid, Volume 4, Sabotage, and the last one was Technical Ecstasy. In between Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy, we had these double LPs of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. But like everything else, I mean, the Black Sabbath timeline is kind of haphazard. It's you never know when something's going to happen. We did a show with John McAtee a while back, not that long ago, where we were talking about the possibility of a Tony Martin box set. So that could be on the horizon. We're hoping. I mean, it hasn't been confirmed, but we're under pretty good suspicion that it will. That could possibly be the next thing. For me, it seems strange that the box sets that have been released so far. Now, Paranoid, that's an obvious one. That has a majority of the hits. That's Paranoid is probably the most popular Black Sabbath album. After that, we had Volume 4. That was a little less likely, but okay, it's also a popular album. But then we had Sabotage, which kind of struck me as strange. Like, really? No Master of Reality, no Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, no first album. We're going to go basically in order, skipping Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and then on to Sabotage. And then after that, in succession, then it was Technical Ecstasy. Now, Technical Ecstasy is not a very popular album by and large to the average, Black Sabbath, to the casual Black Sabbath fan. A lot of people don't. They have a tendency not to like Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. So I thought that was kind of strange. Why Technical Ecstasy? Why not Sabbath Bloody Sabbath? Why not Master of Reality? Those would probably sell better. I mean, they're more popular albums. They're more highly regarded generally.
And at the time, if you remember, when we did our Technical Ecstasy box video, I was thinking that, okay, it's a little close to Christmas here. It's going to break the 2-month announcement, then 2 months later, the box hit. But I had money on the table that we were going to get. They were holding off on one of the biggies, like Master of Reality or the first album, for a Christmas release. I just thought any business sense, you would hold on to one of the biggies for Christmas, which is really the first album in Master of Reality at this point, as far as like general fans and albums that had recognizable songs on them. And then Christmas came and went. We got coal in our stocking. We didn't get anything. Yeah. But I thought for sure that was sort of what was gonna happen.
It seemed to make sense at the time, and we did a show on. Well, we did one on Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy, and when we did the Technical Ecstasy, we were talking about, okay, well, going by the pattern so far, it seems pretty likely that there'll be one for Christmas, and we both agreed that would make sense, and they'd be foolish not to do that, but they didn't. So here we are, 3 months after Christmas. What's going to happen? I don't know. It's curious. I mean, we also talked in our last Sabbath Sunday, the week before last, about the possibility of maybe the original band getting back together. Bill Ward had said something that he would like to do that. I think Tony Iommi had put something out in the press that hinted at the possibility of doing another album, not a tour, but another album that he would like to. He wasn't specific as far as what lineup, but he put it out there that he would be open to putting out more music. So in our discussion for the previous Sabbath Sunday, we went into how it just sort of happened. There were some hints about it. There were some rumblings in the press. And then when you thought it was going to happen, it was going to be announced, Tony came out and said, there are no plans. And then like a week later, he said, well, wait a minute, we actually are. We're recording an album. So it's kind of cool in a way, because you just never know what's going to happen or what they're up to. And I mean, it's like, you really have nothing to go on as far as making any kind of an educated guess as to what could possibly be brewing. But if you want to get creative, you could say, well, one of the reasons the cycle of the Super Deluxe box sets has been disrupted is because the band the original 4 members are in the studio right now, and they're working on
And
an
they're
album.
releasing a
That's
super
why.
deluxe box set of all new material.
I know, it's a super deluxe box that is going to be all new material. Who knows? I mean, that could be. You just never know. But yeah, moving forward under normal circumstances, it's strange that Master of Reality isn't on the schedule. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath isn't on the schedule, or the first album. Now, all of these things have been all these albums, all the albums have been released through Rhino, singularly, double albums with some had bonus tracks, some didn't. We had a WB box set put out through Rhino. We also had the 10-Year War box set, which had the Vertigo imprint on it. I guess that was Universal, I think, put that out over in the UK. So everything has already been released. But if we're going to talk about these super deluxe box sets, it does arouse curiosity as to why these particular albums were released in that format and not more popular albums. And by popular, I would put air quotes, because they're all popular to you and I. We're huge Sabbath fans, but generally the casual fan would probably gravitate more to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or to Master of Reality. So why haven't those been released yet? And when are they going to come out, or are they not going to come out? And isn't it strange that, and maybe I'm getting redundant here, but isn't it strange that the lesser suspects have been released, but not the ones that would be more popular? So that's kind of perplexing. And the answer is, who knows? I don't know. I hope that we get a Master of Reality, and I hope that we get a Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can include. I know. I mean, I could picture the Master of Reality. I know that you could put the poster in from the original Vertigo and Warner Brothers release.
Well, let's get into our expectations for these in a second, because I want to be the doom and gloom guy.
Okay.
And tell you, you're the guy, the positive side. These boxes aren't coming out because hopefully the 4 have gotten back together. You know, there's some logical reason why it haven't come out. I'm the doom and gloom guy. I'm the glass half empty guy. I'm afraid that when Technical Ecstasy came out, for as much as we love Technical Ecstasy, it didn't sell that well. These are already tough sells. These boxes are for a casual fan. These are really expensive, even for some people. You know, I've seen comments as we've made videos and talked about them. You know, people have got enough copies of this. I've already got that show on a bootleg. I don't need this. It's too expensive. So this is for a very, you know, niche market here, you know, the hardcore Sabbath fans. So they're probably operating with a small margin of profit error here, you know, where they don't have a lot of wiggle room for whether they make profit or they lose on one of these boxes. I'm not a businessman. I'm just totally guessing. And maybe the Technical Ecstasy box didn't sell as well as they thought. And they're saying to themselves, you know what? I could picture Iommi casually in an interview at some point when somebody says, hey, whatever the heck happened to the rest of those super deluxe boxes? Oh, well, you know, we already put out a deluxe Master of Reality and first album. If you remember, they had those vinyl versions they put out, the deluxe boxes here in the US that had outtakes on them.
Yeah.
Oh, we already did those 2 albums, and Never Say Die. We don't really like that record, and it was never a great seller for us. And well, I don't know, maybe we'll get around to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath at some point, and then the whole thing just fades away into history.
Okay, but here's the thing with that. Like I just said, all the albums were re-released through Rhino.
Yeah.
So yes, they did do a double album for Master of Reality, as well as Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage, Technical Ecstasy, Never Say Die. But that was one release, and I think they all came out at the same time, or if they didn't they were released pretty close together.
Yeah, but Technical Ecstasy and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and those, they didn't have like the way Master of Reality in the first album had like outtakes and stuff like that. They never did that, did they? With like
No, there
really
was no
volume
outtake.
4 on, right? It was always just the first 3.
But they were part of the same release cycle.
Right, right.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
they, for whatever reason, they chose to make Paranoid had, Black Sabbath had extra tracks, the
Master of
self-titled album,
Reality.
and Paranoid did, and Master of Reality did. Moving
Right.
onward, the album Volume 4 did not, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath did not, Sabotage did not, Technical Ecstasy didn't, and neither did Never Say Die. But they're all part of that release cycle.
Right.
So even though they were all released, they still decided to go back and do the Super Deluxe box sets. Now you could be right. They could be thinking, well, because we didn't put out any extra material in the Volume 4,
Mhm.
we're going to re-release that as a Super Deluxe box set. And because moving from Volume 4 to Never Say Die, there was no extra material, we're going to do those albums in Super Deluxe formats.
And they did Paranoid just because Paranoid is the big seller and they've released that 8 million times already. It's their cash cow.
Right. And that doesn't exactly fit in either. But moving along, so say, okay, so Master of Reality had bonus material on the double album, but Volume 4 did not. And Volume 4 to Never Say Die, no extra material. Okay, fair enough. So put out the Super Deluxe box set of Volume 4 with bonus material and extras. But what about Sabbath Bloody Sabbath?
And what about Never Say Die?
And Never Say Die. But Sabbath Bloody Sabbath would be the next one in succession. And that, upon its original re-release, didn't have any extra material.
Right. Well, that's where my theory comes in, that the box sets in general aren't selling as well as they thought outside of the Paranoid box. And the Technical Ecstasy box may have been the straw that broke their wallet. And they say, you know what? If Technical Ecstasy didn't sell well, we know Never Say Die. I mean, even among, we talk about all the time, Sabbath fans, a lot of Sabbath fans don't like Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. These box sets are already a hard sell, even for, you know, big fans, you know, so they may be thinking to themselves, man, you know, putting out a Never Say Die box or putting out, now Sabbath Bloody Sabbath makes sense, but they may just have pulled the plug on the whole thing. You know, it just seems so weird that they had this cycle going, announced the box set, 2 months later, the box set comes out, 2 months after that, they announced the next one. And they had this cycle going. And then all of a sudden, radio silence.
I don't think there was much concern about the album. I mean, of course, there's some concern about the album. They want them to sell. They're not going to go to the trouble of putting them out if they're not worried about them selling, if they're not concerned about them selling. But if the main incentive was to make the most amount of profit, then wouldn't you pick a more popular album? Yeah. Maybe go with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath instead of Technical Ecstasy, or Master of Reality before Sabotage.
Yeah.
So I mean, if your concern is, well, let's really capitalize on our most popular albums, certainly Technical Ecstasy and Sabotage wouldn't be among them.
Right, so and that's where our theory, our Christmas theory, got blown out of the water when nothing was released on Christmas. Our thing was, well, okay, they're sitting on the big albums that are left, Master of Reality, the first album, for Christmas. It seems so obvious that was probably their planning. And then they'll release Never Say Die like in February or March, which is a real down time right after Christmas. And then when Christmas came and went, that's what really threw me off, was like, whoa, I can't believe they didn't somehow capitalize on the Christmas season. And that's what really makes me think, like, wow, something is maybe going on here. And now we're so far into this without even a peep. And on top of when these box sets are all officially announced, the press releases, there was always a good week or two before that on the Sabbath forum, somebody would find somewhere a picture on like Amazon Germany or Amazon Netherlands, where there was a picture of the box anticipating its release, and everybody be blowing the picture up, trying to see what they're seeing in it. And then 2 weeks later, the
Sabotage.
official, nothing. We haven't
No,
even gotten
no.
that.
Now, I mean, the other thing is we could be overlooking the obvious too. It could be Rhino. Maybe since Rhino's been putting these things out, it could be Rhino's schedule. Maybe Rhino has a schedule that doesn't permit Black Sabbath at this point.
Maybe.
And it could also be maybe the engineers that are involved with these projects, maybe they have other things going on. Maybe that could be some of the reason why these aren't scheduled or they're not in the pipeline yet, because some of the people or the record label don't have it in their queue. It might not be up to the Sabbath camp. It could be, the powers that be.
I would have thought though that when whoever it is, Tony Iommi, the managers, the lawyers, the accountants, when they all sat down, they had to have planned this out, said, okay, we're releasing these 8. This is when they're going to be released. At least I would think, unless they are doing it sort of piecemeal, like let's release 3 of them. Let's see how it goes. Okay, let's do 2 or 3 more. And they're just sort of going like that. But
I'm going to get Tony Iommi on the phone right now.
Hold on, Tony's over here. All right, well, let's talk about what we hope is going to be. Let's assume that the rest of the box sets are going to come out, and let's talk about what we think and what we hope is going to be in the future one. So you mentioned Master of Reality. Let's start with Master of Reality. You mentioned the poster. That's
the poster. There are outtakes, studio outtakes. You would have one record. You'd basically take the double album that came out on Rhino, the WB. Then that would be your core of the box set. You'd have the studio album, probably the same master, the Andy Wallace master, remaster. We'd have the studio outtakes. In addition to that, there's a lot of live stuff out there, especially from this album cycle. A lot of good shows to include in the box set. So you could put 2 live albums in there, a double live album. So it would be easily, you could say you could make it a 4 record set. In addition to that, you put your tour book in there. You do a poster, one of the promo posters. What else?
Well, and they could also the original album was in, what was the original album, like a pull out, the cover or something was?
The Vertigo was like a thin, slender box where it had like a tab, and you had the inner sleeve and a poster. It was like basically a thin box. Now the Warner Brothers was just an embossed cover.
Right. They could do something with that, where one of them is the embossed cover and one of them is the slide box. Now, the question is, so far, all the boxes so far, the shows on them have all been either TV or radio broadcasts. So do you know of any shows from the Master of Reality era of the band that were radio or TV broadcasts?
No, most are, there's quite a few soundboards that were privately recorded, but I don't think any of them were broadcast. But yeah, I mean, that's a good point. The live albums that had been released prior were things that people knew about. These would be a little bit more obscure. But I mean, I think that would be kind of a nice surprise too. I mean, well, the Paranoid, we had the Montreux. I don't think that was a very popular show. I mean, it was among collectors.
Was that a radio or a TV broadcast though?
I think well, I know it was definitely, I think it was a TV. No, it wasn't TV. It might have been a radio broadcast, but it was still relatively obscure.
Yeah.
As
was the Technical Ecstasy show. That was a show that, it's not like that was slightly obscure too, but that was a radio broadcast.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what would be their criteria for what shows they use, but there's certainly a lot of them out there. So, I mean, I think that consistently the box sets have always had live material.
Yeah.
So
There should be
that
something
would kind of be
live on there.
no brainer to put live material. But I mean, I think just the album itself, in the same way that Volume 4. I mean, Volume 4 was interesting in that you had the outtakes. It got a little tedious after a while listening to 4 outtakes or whatever it was, Snowblind.
Wheels of Confusion.
Wheels of Confusion, yeah. Wasn't really necessary, but it was cool. So to put the package together, you just need things, I guess, that are supported by the fact that you have a good remastered version of the album, a decent live show, and then you just fill the rest in with interesting things that are more out of curiosity than necessity. And there you go. I mean, that's what a super deluxe box set basically is. It's like you start with your, what you can't not have, and that's a good version of the album and the live show, and then throw in whatever else.
And I would say if we jump all the way to now, if we jump to Never Say Die, I think 2 things can happen with that. Technical Ecstasy was the first box set where there was a remixed version of one of the albums. Now, I made a video a long time ago on the difference between a remaster and a remix. Not going to really get into that now, but remixed, they're going in and they're adjusting the levels differently. I enjoyed that. It brought the bass out a lot more on Technical Ecstasy. I was hearing things that I'd never heard before. I thought it was very well done. Steve Wilson did the remix of Technical Ecstasy, and Wallace did the remaster of Technical Ecstasy. Now, Never Say Die, I would absolutely love. It's the only one left that I would love to have a remix of. A remix of Never Say Die would be incredible. And there's, of course, they could just take the sound from the Never Say Die video show that they did. And I think that there's even another radio broadcast from that tour. Isn't it like something over Texas or something? I think it's called
Shockwave over Texas.
Yeah, that's, I think, a radio. And I think there's a radio broadcast from Europe, from I think maybe in Sweden or Lund, Sweden, maybe Switzerland or something. I think there's another radio broadcast out there too. So I think they would have plenty to pick from for a live show for Never Say Die. Don't know. Go ahead.
The Lund, Sweden was 76, and that had a lot of different titles. People were creative with that. One was Killing Yourself to Die, as opposed to Killing Yourself to Live. Killing Yourself to Die was the Lund, Sweden, 1976.
Okay, so that would have been Technical Ecstasy tour then, right?
Yeah, it was Technical Ecstasy, yeah.
All right, well, there's at least that Texas broadcast and there's the Never Say Die video. So there's something for them to pick from for Never Say Die. A remix of that album would be fantastic. Don't know if there's any multiple takes or outtakes from that. That would certainly be interesting. Let's say something like Breakout without just the rhythm section, without the horns on it. They probably have stuff like that laying around. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Isn't there a radio? I know they did the Don Kirshner rock concert was after Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, right? So I don't know if they have access to that audio, and I don't know if there's any radio broadcasts from that, but I'm sure there could be a lot of outtakes away from Volume 4 and that might be interesting because Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath has a little bit more layered guitars and stuff. It might be cool to hear stripped down guitar, bass, drum versions of some of the Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, songs. So
there's a few things about Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath that would interest me. The Don Kirshner, I believe that was Sabotage. That was Costa Mesa, California.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sabotage,
1975, and that was I think it started. I know the show started with Hole in the Sky, I'm pretty sure, but the Ontario Motor Speedway, the California Jam show.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah,
and that was soundboard, and that has been in bootleg form for 30 years now. That would be good to have a remastered version of that. Again, it'll most likely be MP3 source, but when we're talking about like 320 bit rate, you know, it's not too bad. It's slight compression, but no worse than the 75 New England show that was on that was included with the Sabotage, which I think
box,
sounds
yeah.
pretty good. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I wouldn't mind hearing a remix of that, or
Yeah,
because as many, I think there's been like at least 2 or 3 remasters, possibly more, since the album was released, and the volume, the master volume, never seems to get above what it was originally mastered at, and I would love to hear it a little louder. I think by the time we get to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath on the end of side 1, the volume seems to go down. It's like in a downward slope. And overall, the master volume is kind of low, and a lot of, and I say that because it's distracting in a way where there's a very lush production involved with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and there's a lot of overdubs, especially when looking for today, when you have the flute, and you have acoustic guitar, and you have heavy guitar, and layered vocal tracks and things like that. But the volume is so low, it's really hard to hear everything that's going on. I would love to have a better mix in a way where some of these extra things, some of these overdubs were brought up a little louder in the mix, and you could hear some of these things that were going on, because some of them are kind of obscured overall. And I know there's a lot going on in the production, and I think the production as it is really good, but again, there's a lot more detail that I'd like to be able to hear. I'd like it to be more audible. So that would be my wish for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, is just to have the overall fidelity improved. And it'd be cool to have the California Jam show, nice remastered version of that. I mean, I know I've listened to it hundreds of times, so I mean, I know it probably about as well as I know the studio album, but
yeah,
it'd be cool to have a definitive version of that.
yeah.
I don't know if there's any unreleased tracks or anything. There's probably like some single edits and things like that you could probably throw onto a bonus record. I'm sure they could probably find something, you know. But the main thing would be, I'd like to have a remix of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, possibly just maybe a more in-depth remaster, like really getting in there and boosting the levels, and not just doing like a smiley face EQ, but really getting in there. And maybe somebody other than Andy Wallace, because Andy Wallace, while he has done a good job, there's not a profound difference from the original masters. I mean, I was really looking forward to what he was going to do with Volume 4, and I was a little bit let down. I don't hear that much of a difference between the original Vertigo master of Volume 4, the Porky, the George Peckman version, which is, since we're talking about it, is far superior to the Warner Brothers master. But I was hoping that Andy Wallace would even take the Porky Peckman version and make that sound even better. But actually it still sounds, the Vertigo still sounds better. I don't think Andy Wallace. Now, what Andy Wallace did is probably an improvement over the original WB master, but when you're listening to the Vertigo, the original Vertigo versus the remaster in a super deluxe box set, I'm going with the original Vertigo master. So with regard to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I'd like to maybe get Stephen Wilson in there, since he did such a great job with Technical Ecstasy. I'd like to see what he's capable of. And
Remix of, so for me,
hands.
I'll just to put this out there, I've probably said this before already, I don't really like these Andy Wallace remasters, just the whole smiley face, bass treble scooped in the middle. I don't like it.
Yeah.
But Steve Wilson remixing Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and Never Say Die, I would love. And I think you're going to agree with me on this. I don't want a remix of, and I don't think it's necessary for Master of Reality or.
No, I totally agree.
Album. Stay away from those two with a remix. If you want to remaster it, go ahead. I'm not going to like it if it's done the way the other ones have been done. We don't need a remix of the first two. In fact, I think that that would mess those up if those were messed around like that. And the first album, if this is the only one we haven't talked about, they could release, you know, when Ozzy had that box set years ago. I mean, I'm talking 20 plus years ago, and he called them demos. There were 4 Black Sabbath songs. The song Black Sabbath, War Pigs, I think NIB and Fairies Wear Boots. They were listed as demos, but really they were Peel sessions. John Peel, who was a radio DJ. So to put out those John Peel sessions on the first album box, you've got some miscellaneous things like from those TV things like Blue Suede Shoes, if they want to throw that on, whatever. Of course, we would all love if they would just finally release these Earth demos that are rumored to be out there. When I Came Down, that could be a topic for another video, but we'll just throw out there that there's these Earth demos that various bits and pieces have dribbled out over the years. When I Came Down, Song for Jim, The Rebel, who knows what else might be sitting out there. That would, of course, be our dream. And if they put out a box set that had 4 or 5 unreleased Black Sabbath demos on it, I can't help but think that that would be one of their, next to Paranoid, one of their biggest sellers. And maybe that's the ace in their pocket that they're sitting on. You know, maybe that's like their, okay, you know, here we go. We're throwing all our cards on the table. Here's the biggie. We're dropping the big one, and it's going to be the one with the demos, these unheard demos that Sabbath fans have been clamoring for years. That would be something. And if that shows up next and they made us wait this long for that, it's all forgiven.
And you know, we might be underestimating the profit potential of Never Say Die. I think Never Say Die has grown in popularity over the years. It's certainly grown in popularity since the time it was released. I remember the reunion tour. A lot of the visuals, the T-shirts, the logos and things. Well, the logo was sort of like it was like half Master of Reality and half Never Say Die.
The fighter pilot image started showing up.
So you saw a lot of that, and they reissued the original 78 tour shirt with the fighter pilot on the front.
Tony Stark in Iron Man was wearing the fighter pilot Black Sabbath thing. So it has sort of grown in legend. And if they promoted it the right way, and if there was maybe some interesting outtakes from it, I'm sure they wouldn't put out the Dave Walker stuff. Sharon and Ozzy probably wouldn't want that on there, but there could be some interesting outtakes on there. There could be some interesting stories. They could hype that up as though it was the last album, this forgotten gem. If the band was smart, they could come out and say, you know, we had bad feelings about this record at the time, but when we were making this box and sat down and listened to it again, and it got a nice remix, you know, it shines new light on this album, and we feel differently about it now. We've said this before, we won't get into this now, but part of the problem with Technical Ecstasy, and especially Never Say Die, is that the band dumps on it all the time. It was a bad point in their career. It was a bad point in their personal lives. So they have bad memories around making that. And they're so dismissive of that record. Anytime that record comes up, it's like this, you know, we don't want to talk about it. That was awful. It was blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe if you clean it up, remix it, add some bonuses, try to remember what was good about that time frame, and, you know, and maybe them talk positively about it. It could be really hyped up. Like I said, that just the image, the fighter pilot image, just because of like the Iron Man movie. Once Tony Stark started wearing that in Iron Man, I bought one of those shirts. I bought it at like Kohl's or Walmart or something. I mean, you know, to think that in the 80s, I would have never thought I could have walked into a mainstream clothing store and bought a Black Sabbath shirt with the fighter pilot on it. I mean, it's taken on a new kind of life. So they could really sort of talk that up and hype that up and make something out of that.
Yeah, and it's curious that the imagery from that album, which is probably their least popular album of the Ozzy era, was the most recognized Sabbath logo visual of the 90s.
It's almost like a mascot in some ways. You know, they have, what do they call him? Henry, the winged, demon guy. That's sort of, I would say, probably their proper mascot, but it's almost like the fighter pilot dude has become like this sort of second symbol or mascot for the band.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, with the right promotion, with the right push behind it, I mean, they could have 4 aces. They could have self-titled, Master of Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And don't underestimate Never Say Die as a possible ace too. You know, people see that cover, they associate it with some of the more recent things that, you know, it's been lumped in with, and think of the album in a different light. It could be just as popular among the newer generation as, say, Master of Reality. Strange as it may seem.
All we need is Kim Kardashian to wear one of those shirts with the fighter pilot on it, and all of a sudden it goes viral, and all of a sudden Never Say Die is back in the charts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, got any final thoughts on the box sets?
Yeah. Another thing that I've always kind of wondered. I mean, there's so much video, and I, with these, you know, other box sets and super deluxe things, for lack of a better word. And we'll talk about the Metallica, because the Metallica box sets are great examples of giving the fans a lot of stuff within these box sets. I mean, they go to like great lengths. You've got laminates, stickers, there's books, 24-page books, 30-page books. There's a lot of really good live stuff. But there's also a little package, and there's also a little tray with DVDs and CDs. I mean, I'm kind of curious as to why Sabbath didn't go that route. Why wasn't any of these super deluxe versions CD, DVD, and vinyl? I mean, there are a lot of box sets by other artists that have been put out and have multimedia. I mean, I'd love to see a remastered DVD version of the Hammersmith show. I mean, we have it on DVD. Started out having it on VHS, and then sometime around early to mid 90s, it came out on DVD. It was really cool to see it on DVD, but no Blu-ray. Let's up the quality and get that sucker on Blu-ray. I'd love to see a really clean version of the Costa Mesa show, the Don Kirshner. Now, if that was going to be included in anything, it would have been in the Sabotage, but it wasn't. But that's just for the sake of conversation. It would be really cool to have these archival videos that we can see on YouTube, but to have it in a Blu-ray format and improved quality, picture quality, would be really cool. And of course, also the Paris 1970. You know,
I'm gonna guess. Okay, glass half full. They're going to put them all in a DVD box. There'll be a DVD box release. Glass half empty. They don't own, they can't get the rights, can't find the original tapes, or however you want to think of it, to a lot of that early stuff, like the Paris 70, Don Kirshner, California Jam. Can't find the original tapes, can't get the rights to them. I'll give you an example of this. There's that guy on YouTube, Reeling in the Years, I think is the name of his thing. And there's a Pro Shot Technical Ecstasy show. And if you go to his, I'm pretty sure it's in the Black Sabbath Technical Ecstasy show, he leaves a comment where the guy that owns the company, and he basically explains why this stuff hasn't been released. And he has, this is weird copyright laws and things like that. He has this Pro Shot film. He said, people contact me all the time. How much can I pay you to get this? And he has to explain that the rights are, he owns parts of the rights, but the band also owns part of the rights. He can't release it himself without the band's permission. The band has to buy it off of him for them to be able to release it. So it's stuck in this sort of in between limbo. They both need each other to release this. That's why he just can't I think he even says, look, it doesn't matter. You can have a fundraiser and raise all the money in the world. I can't release it because Black Sabbath technically owns it. That's why when he posts this thing, it's only snippets and it's got the watermark on it. But why doesn't Black Sabbath approach them and buy it off of them? It's sitting right there. It's a pro shot technical ecstasy show that has never seen the light of day in any form, not even in like a short form MTV style video thing.
Yeah.
But it's sitting there. They must know about it, but who knows how these weird things.
Yeah, the footage is incredible.
I mean, it's fantastic. It's amazing that they're sitting on this, and it makes you wonder, like, okay, if they're sitting on that, you know, what's the arena? Is it DC? Is it somewhere in DC that always filmed their shows, or is it Maryland or something? If you go on YouTube, there's dozens and dozens of shows. It's a big venue that had multiple cameras set up that they filmed every show that was in there. And they did it because bands then could buy the rights to it. There's one for Blue Oyster Cult. I've seen Blue Oyster Cult on it. I've seen, I don't know, just dozens of bands. And it wouldn't be surprised me if they've got Sabbath in their archive somewhere, like around the, so there's probably stuff like this sitting there. It's like, why don't they, who knows, maybe the cost of buying the rights to these things, maybe this Reelin' in the Years wants like a ridiculous exorbitant fee for the rights to this, and they feel like it's just not worth it. Maybe the Don Kirshner stuff, again, maybe it falls into this weird thing. It's technically the film footage is owned by Don Kirshner or that company or whoever controls that, and the Sabbath camp can't work out an agreement. They don't have the original tapes, you know, who knows? There could be, because it's just shocking that they haven't done anything with video, archival video. The only thing to my knowledge that they've done is those Black Sabbath history. I had them on VHS. It was like a red box, and I think it was a blue or a black box.
Black and gold, yeah. I have them.
Yeah, those two things. And when the black box came out, there was a DVD that came with it that had like those, the footage of them doing like blue suede shoes. And I forget where that was, in Germany or something. It's gotten, you know, them doing Paranoid and Black Sabbath.
It was like Hamburg, Germany, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could be right. It could be with the Don Kirshner, it could be tied up with the studio. They may not be able to get access to it. The original footage may not even exist. I mean, who knows? I mean, basically what you see on YouTube and, you know, the versions that people have might be all that exists. So there may not be a root source anymore.
Even if they just collected those, like they took an MP3 source for one of the live, you know, the Sabotage live stuff, try to get a high quality video bootleg, clean it up as best you can, and just tie this all together and put it out. So we all have it in one place, cleaned up, clean up the audio, clean up the video the best you can, give us a nice high quality DVD. At the minimum, we've got Never Say Die. We know that's out there. You've got the black, and if we want to go into the Dio years, we've got the black and blue footage from the tour they did with Blue Oyster Cult. There's at least, 4 or 5 songs that were released with that. That's another, I read an interview with Albert Bouchard, drummer for Blue Oyster Cult, and they asked him why that has never been released. And it's pretty much for the reasons that we're talking about. It's just tied up in a legal mess because it's Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult involved, because there's a film company involved, because there's all these managers that have hands in it, that it's just, he's like, there's so much red tape around it. He goes, we tried to have it released years ago, but there was just so much red tape and hoops we had to jump through that we just backed away from it. So who knows?
Yep.
All right. Well, there you go. There's our thoughts on the box sets. What do you guys think out there? Are we going to get more box sets? What do you think is going to be in these box sets? How about some DVDs? What kind of footage would you like to see? out there and maybe a DVD box set or released from Sabbath in the future, let us know in the comments down below. And we will see you again at the next Sabbath Sunday.